All right, so we're going to talk about writing equations of lines in this video, and we're going to do all of the notes for this section in one video, but I'm going to break it up using Edpuzzle and ask you some questions along the way. So we're going to zoom in on the first part here. There are three forms of the equation of a line, and you will need to memorize these to use them later on. You are probably most familiar with slope-intercept form. Now, keep in mind with slope-intercept form, that is slope and y-intercept, and the y-intercept is the point where the line hits the y-axis. That form, of course, is y equals what? Good. mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. So that would be the point 0, b. Now, one you might also have learned about in Algebra 1, but haven't used as much, but it's really super useful, is point slope. And point slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And in this case, m is the slope again, and x1 comma y1 is a point on the line. So with slope-intercept, you need the y-intercept itself. With point slope, all you need is a point. Doesn't have to be specifically the y-intercept. The third form, which is actually more useful when we're working with systems of equations, is called standard form. And standard form is given by ax plus by equals c. And there's a few restrictions on a, b, and c. A, b, and c must all be integers. That means no fractions, no decimals. And a and b can't both be 0, because that would leave you with 0 equals c. And if c is like 2, 0 equals 2 is not a true statement. And if c was 0, z equals 0, that works for any point x, y, so you'd fill in the entire plane. So these are the three forms of a line that you're going to need to know. Now, when we go to write equations of lines, all lines are defined by two unique qualities. The first is the slope. That gives you the tilt of the line. And the second is a point that the line passes through. Because if you have slope, that gives you the tilt, the point anchors it in the xy plane, and there could be no other line that has the same slope and passes through that point. So whenever you're writing the equation of a line, you really want to make sure that you've got the slope of the line and a point on that line first. All right, so let's do some practice in writing equations of lines. We're going to start with point slope form, and I'm going to write point slope form down here again so we can have it in front of us. Now, point slope form is the easiest to use whenever you have a point and a slope. Literally, here's my slope, 2/3, that's m. Here's my point, 3. So my x sub 1 is 3, and my y sub 1 is -4. So I'm just going to plug the numbers in. Oops, I forgot to put in my slope, didn't I? I'll do that in the next step. And literally, that is the equation of the line in point slope form. Now, the x and the y that are left here should be, you could take any point that's on the line and plug it in for x and y, and it would make that statement true, make it a true equation. Now, you practice the next one. I've given you a point, I've given you a slope, you pause the video, write the equation, and then you can unpause it to check your work. So here's my slope, 3/5, my point, -2, -7. So I'm going to plug all those things in. And then simplify at the end. Of course, if you jump straight to this step, because you know that subtracting a negative means adding, that's perfectly fine. All right, let's go to the next page. Now we're going to focus on writing equations in slope-intercept form. And there's two different ways of doing this, and it doesn't really matter which way you choose. I'm going to show you both ways, and you can choose whichever way works best for you. Now, here we're given a point and a slope, and we want to get it in y equals mx plus b form because that is slope-intercept. So there are two ways. Method one is to get it in point-slope form first. So I'd start with y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And then what I would do is get y by itself and combine everything that can be combined. So the first thing I would do is get y by itself by moving the 5 over. And then I would distribute the negative 5/4. And negative 5/4 times 2 is negative 10/4, which is negative 5/2. And then I would combine like terms. Negative 5/2 plus 10/2 is positive 5/2. So this would have a slope of negative 5/4, y-intercept of 5/2. There it is in slope-intercept form. So method one is get it in point-slope form and then get y by itself and combine like terms. Method two involves starting with slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. We know the slope is negative 5/4, but we don't know the y-intercept. We know a point, but we don't know the y-intercept. So I'm going to plug in negative 5/4 for the slope. Now, if this point is going to make this line work, when you plug it in for x and y, it should make the equation work. So what I'm going to do is take my point now, and I'm going to plug the y in for y, and I'm going to plug the x value in for x, and then I'm going to use that information to solve for b. So I'm going to multiply negative 5/4 times negative 2, that would be positive 10/4, which is positive 5/2. And then I'm going to get b by itself by subtracting 5/2 from each side. 5 minus 5/2 is 5/2. So my b is 5/2, and the last thing I need to do is to write the equation, which means basically I now know the slope. I knew that from the beginning, and now I know the y-intercept because I solved for it. So method two is to start in slope-intercept form, plug in the slope for m, plug in the point you're given for x and y, solve for b, and then write the equation. Now, when you do this practice problem, choose which method you like better, method one or method two, and do it, because again, you can choose whichever method you want on these. Pause the video and do it. All right, so here I've done method one and method two side by side. So in order to check your work, you may want to pause the video and check those answers. By the way, on method two, the biggest thing to remember is once you find b, don't forget to actually write the equation. And when you write the equation, it needs to have the y and the x in it, not just the 1 and the 7 in it. All right, now we're going to move on to the next page. Now we're writing an equation in standard form. All right, now standard form is one of those that you never want to try to go directly into standard form. The method for standard form is to write it in a different form and then change that to standard form. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I'm going to write this equation first in point-slope form because that's what I like best. Now, I'm going to get it into slope-intercept form, and if you wanted to jump directly to slope-intercept form, you could do that using method 2 from what we talked about last time. So now we've got slope-intercept form. Now standard form basically has two things going on. First of all, you need the x and the y on the same side. So I'm going to move the x over. And then you can't have any fractions. So in order to make those fractions go away here, that negative 3/4, I'm going to multiply everything in the equation by 4. Now, some teachers make a big deal about the x term, that the a can't be negative. I mean, if you want to change it, you can. But remember, you'd have to change the signs on everything, either of those answers would be perfectly fine. So if you're writing in standard form, the idea is to use the information you're given to get it in a different form, point slope or slope intercept, and then get it in standard form by getting the x and the y on the same side and getting rid of any fractions. So now I'd like you to practice that problem. Pause the video and unpause it to check your answer. All right, so this time I went directly to slope intercept form and then I converted it to standard form. So check your answer, see if you got the same thing I did. All right, let's move on to the last page of the notes. So we just, in the last example, went from slope intercept form into standard form. Now we just need to talk about how to go in reverse. And the reason you want to find that is if you ever wanted to graph something in standard form, it's easiest to get it in slope intercept form so you can get the slope and the y-intercept and then use those to graph the line. So if you wanted to go from standard form to slope intercept form, it's pretty straightforward. Get y by itself. So I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides. And then I'm going to divide everything by -3. And then you want to write that coefficient of the x out to the side. You don't want to leave the 3 in the bottom just because it can be confusing if you're not careful. So this is now in slope intercept form. The y is by itself. The slope of this line is 5/3, and the y-intercept is -6, or 0, -6. So to go from slope standard form into slope intercept form, you basically get the y by itself. You won't be asked to go from standard form into point slope form. In fact, it's impossible to do that without being given a point on the line. All right, so there are the notes, and we will be doing some practice with these things in class next time.